Wealthittude crew, this last 6 months has been historic, record breaking. And here are some things that every single investor kind of needs to know. So, what have we seen happen over the last 6 months? Well, within the US market, believe it or not, we have seen 172 IPOs. How many of us actually knew that? That's more than 13%, almost 14% more on the market than we had at the same time last year. This year, we mentioned it earlier, the biggest single IPO in history, SpaceX, raising 75 billion, that's billion with a B, on the exchange. So when you look at that and you compare that to the IPO sizes on the US market in 2025 alone, the entire US market had a raise of 45 billion. So all of 2025, about approximately 45 billion in funds would have been raised through the exchange. This year, SpaceX alone accounted for 75 billion in one day. I mean, my gosh, we are living in some fantastic times. And folks, for those of you who think that we're at the end of this IPO run, listen, we have just started. There are a number of companies left set to IPO, which will cause the 2026 year to be one of the biggest in living memory. We have OpenAI expected to list, we have Anthropic expected to list, along with a host of other very, very interesting companies. So 2026 is a year of opportunity. Be in the know, stay in the know, because this world is both a very, very big but very, very small place. And of course, as you know, knowledge matters. Knowledge is power. So let's look at some additional trends coming through from 2026 so far. So over quarter one, we have seen, some of the strongest markets coming through. So during the period ending March 2026, we had about 9.4 billion in raises already, right? And that compares, that easily outshines what we saw in 2025 and 2024. When you look at some major companies that would have listed, we're seeing where, as I mentioned to you before, we just saw SpaceX list, but SpaceX wasn't the only key thing happening. We had AI semiconductor companies coming through doing big listings. So one of which, a notable one, would have been Cerebra Systems. I don't know how many of you are familiar with that. But when they listed at an IPO price of 185. Now I know you remember what the IPO price is because we just spoke about that, right? So on the on the first day of trading, so they listed at 185. On the first day of trading, they traded up to $350, a 68% improvement in the value of those shares. Now, when they came to market, they did a total raise of about 5.5 billion thereabouts. Now, though they have had a positive experience coming through their first day worth of trading, I do want to caution, right, as we have before, when it is that you buy into any business, whether it's at the IPO stage or when it starts to trade publicly, you always want to make sure, one, that you're comfortable with the company that you're buying into. So it's not necessarily about just the price, from a market perspective. You have to have or own or invest in a business that you are comfortable with, that you know or that you feel has a great chance or has a bright future, is a business that is a growing concern. If it is that you're buying into a share because the market sentiment is great and all of your friends are talking about it, yeah, that's not investing. That's something else. That's gambling. That's, I don't know what that is, but that's not the way. What you want to do is do your research. So engage with your broker, your financial institution, get all of the information that you can. Do your own research. Information is available because these are entities that are about to list publicly. Their prospectus is typically available, and you have access to historic information and forward looking information on those companies. So take advantage of that. SpaceX, that we just spoke about, also had a pretty good debut. So they listed at 135. Now, as you recall, they raised about 75 billion for the IPO, and that company has now currently has a market cap of about 2.1 trillion. So on their first day of trading, they would have seen an improvement in their value of 19.2%. So they listed at 135, and they traded at the end of their first day of trading at 160.95. So imagine if you were a SpaceX investor, either an initial investor or someone who bought at IPO after your first day worth of trading. 19.25%, 19.2% would feel pretty good, wouldn't it? That's pretty awesome. But beyond all of the euphoria around what the price traded at, there are also some key things in buying, the shares that you're buying. So for somebody who's buying SpaceX, I think we had mentioned it before. What are you in fact buying? Well, you're buying the entity that handles Starlink. For many of us who are very familiar with that, we're buying, reusable rockets and then finding more efficient ways to approach space entry. You're buying into, the X social platform. You're buying into AI Grok models. So get to understand some of these businesses intimately. Don't just depend on the euphoria around the price. Get to know them. Remember, when you buy a share, it's not just a piece of paper. It's not just an electronic transaction. It's actually buying into a business, which means if your money has to go there, understand it really, really well, or as well as you can. Ask tons of questions. Watch a lot of, finance-based shows that help to break down company performances, whether they have met their quarterly earnings estimates, what are some of their plans to grow and size their businesses, even if it is that sometimes that businesses may not necessarily at the point of IPOing be profitable. So all of those things are pretty important to you. Now, we go into the post-IPO phase. So once you've gotten through the IPO and the initial hype and the initial excitement and it's all good, and let's say whether you're up 10%, 20%, 15%, or you're down 10%, 20%, 15%, the fundamentals remain, right? So you want to make sure you pay attention to those earnings. For all entities, whether they're traded on the Jamaica Stock Exchange or NASDAQ or any of the other exchanges across the world, you want to pay very, very close attention to those quarterly earnings. You want to pay very close attention to what the ownership in the business, ownership/management in the business is doing about managing their overall operating frameworks. That includes future plans to grow the business, plans to be able to make sure the business remains efficient, the growth intentions, whether they've met quarterly expectations or not. And if they met it, fantastic. And you typically end up being rewarded by movements up in share price. And if they've not met it, sometimes you get penalized, sometimes you don't. But pay attention to what are the necessary actions to support getting the improvements to ensure that the business remains a good, strong, growing concerns. So, we did mention we had a couple of notable IPOs that have already gone, and we're encouraging our entire Wealthitude family, whether you're here in Jamaica, the US, UK, wherever, continue to do your research on those that have already IPO'd. But there are others on the horizon. So we have Kraken that's expected to list, Canva, many of you are familiar with, Stripe, Databricks, OpenAI, Anthropic, a combined pipeline of something in the order of just over 3 trillion worth of IPO value that is expected to hit the market over the next 12 months. So, even if it is that you may have missed a SpaceX or a Cerebras or one of the others that would have listed, you do have the opportunity to be able to participate in something else that may ideally suit you. So, make sure that you stay in the know, follow us as well, because we'll be watching it as close as a hawk, right? Because we want to make sure that, our Wealthitude family and ourselves are taking advantage of these IPOs as the opportunities arise. And folks, you do realize that a number of these IPOs are actually in the AI space. So for many investors, analysts, etc., this particular phase feels a lot like the start of the internet. Is the closest kind of parallel that we can frame to it, and so that means we expect how we do things to evolve fundamentally from this point going forward through the presence of AI. And so therefore, businesses that are central to that, businesses that are core to the AI experience, are businesses that we think are worthy of, certainly are worthy of our investment dollar. And we would suggest that you do some research and determine whether you are of the similar mind. And if it is that you are of similar mind, you may want to take advantage of those kind of opportunities. Join the Wealthittude, money